Hello everyone, I'm Ant, and welcome to my bot collection. Remember how in recent videos I mentioned how I sort of fell out of Transformer collecting because I just wanted the more intricately engineered and more complex figures and started dismissing the more fun and gimmicky figures that were out there, like some kind of boring git. I had a few alternators and I got the first Masterpiece Optimus Prime and a few of the big ones like Unicron and Tidal Wave. Smaller figures just weren't going to cut it anymore. One problem, those big figures were expensive. Anyway, long story short, I went and got my second Masterpiece figure. Folks, here is MPM9 Movie Masterpiece Jazz. Look, right, I wasn't going to get him, but that 60 guy did a video of a repaint of him, and then I looked on Kapow Toys and it was under 50 quid, so what was I supposed to do? Not get it? Cut me some slack, yeah? Now, we're starting off in car mode this time because there's an element of the robot mode that I want to show off last, and also the transformation from car mode to robot is a little bit more fluid than the other way round. What a lovely car it is though. I believe it's a Pontiac something or the other. I could look that up. In fact, I will look it up. It's a Pontiac Solstice GXP hardtop. I am going to forget that the moment I'm done with this review. Look, I'm not much of a car person and I only really remember the ones that I drive in Forza Motorsport, so yeah. What I do know is that this is a really nice looking car. It's all shiny and smooth and looks really cool, and that's my in-depth analysis. As a car mode, this looks super nice, but it is lacking in some features. There's no opening doors or hoods going on. That's fine though. I get that turning a real-world car into one of those Michael Bay movie robots probably requires a whole load of compromise just to get it to work. Must say though, this is only my third movie figure, and the ones I've got all transform really well. One little feature the car mode does has is the ability to attach this gun to the spoiler, which looks really cool even if the barrels do barely clear the roof. Paint-wise, this is very silver. I was a tad worried when I boxed him that I was going to be chipping bits of paint off during the transformation. I have spotted a little bit of paint wear on the wing mirrors and the edge of the spoiler, but those parts don't clash into anything during transformation. I have to assume I rubbed the paint off with my fat greasy fingers. It's barely visible though, and I'm not too worried about it getting much worse. So, pretty nice car mode. There's not much else to say because it is just a real world car. When you transform Jazz into car mode, it can be a little bit fiddly to get all these panels all lined up correctly. I had a nightmare with it the other day and it turned out one of his toes was slightly out of place on the inside, causing the whole side to be unable to be tabbed in. Speaking of the toes and the rest of him, let's transform. Now, I'm not going to go step by step here because there's like 50 steps and it's incredibly fiddly. Also, I'm still trying to figure out a way to cover transformations in my videos that feels right for me. But let's cover some of the highlights as I go, yeah? First step is very Bayformer as you split the car open down the sides like this, revealing all kinds of mechanical bits. It's this car exploding into pieces sort of thing that I think of when I think of the movie transformations. You know, like when you see those diagrams of a car exploded and all the mechanics coming out. After flipping up the roof, you start to unfurl the legs, and I kinda like how neat these are to transform. Normally with a car bot, you expect the back end of the car to just become feet, but that's not really possible with the way these are designed. So the entirety of the legs are hidden inside, and you have to sort of flip out and tab in a whole bunch of small pieces to gradually construct the full legs. The way the rear of the car sort of folds up around the wheels is kind of neat, and it all tabs in quite nicely. My favourite part of the transformation is the hood. It does this weird double twist thing I don't think I've ever seen done before. Basically, you lift up the hood, spin the headlights and grille section all the way around, then you shut down the hood and sort of tab it in under the bumper. Then you give the whole front half of the car another twist, so the hood ends up on the bottom. And then you just sort of fold it all down, and that's your basic carbot bonnet boob. All that mechanism is there to hide the hood under the chest, when I would have just expected it to fold up with the roof and boot parts, which fold up super nicely by the way. That is not a bad backpack at all. The arms are a bit fiddly though, although there is some really clever engineering there. The side panels fold up really small and ends up looking quite alright. The forearms are a bit awkward though, because you're sort of tabbing together a whole bunch of small parts to create the rough shape of a forearm. I'm not sure the end result is ideal, and a lot of that comes down to some articulation worries which we'll get into later. All you've really got to do from there is some flat flipping and a head reveal, and there's your boy Jazz. I've got to say, the transformation is nowhere near the nightmare I was imagining before getting this. I think in my head the Bay movie designs are such a random mass of metal that I can't imagine the transformations being anything other than an absolute pain. This is pretty fun though, fiddly for sure, and not something I'd expect someone to transform first time without the instructions, but I genuinely think it's pretty decent. When I first did this, I thought there was no way I'd be able to transform it back again without the instructions first time, but I managed it. I wouldn't call it intuitive, but it's certainly not a nightmare. No clearance issues or any of those moments where it feels like you have to use a little bit too much force. Good stuff. So here we are at Jazz the Robot. Now I know there's a lot of G1 purists who hate these designs, and I totally understand that. They are very busy and cluttered. I'm still not entirely in love with them, however, I do think they make for some pretty interesting toys. Like the fact this overly aggressive pile of metal came out of a Pontiac whatever it was is pretty incredible to me. When I was looking at the Kapow Toys website, I did consider just getting the Studio Series one, because they usually look the part, but I'll put a pick up and I'll let you decide. There's no contest. This Masterpiece Jazz knocks the Studio one out of the water. I actually had to check that the Studio one I was looking at wasn't one of the regular figures from 2007. Detail on this thing is super nice. I would have liked some darker colours on the inner robot bits, but I also wonder if I'm only thinking of that because the video 6.0 did nudged me to get this figure in the first place. I mentioned the backpack already, but that is seriously the closest thing to kibble there is on this figure. It's not bad at all. There's a couple of weird things I spotted on this design though. There's a few parts that move like they were designed for transformation, but they clearly aren't. First is what's left of the car windows here. They can swivel inwards to be fully hidden, but when you do that you can't tab this door part in anymore. Makes me wonder if they were originally meant to be less curved and so you could slide them away nicely inside. Also the hips have these flaps that don't really do anything, but they're on hinges, which makes me think that maybe they were meant to be flattened out for the car mode. These aren't an issue though, just things I've noticed. Articulation's a bit odd. Legs are fine, but they can't rotate at the thighs or the ankles. There's a bit of ankle tilt, but only inwards. Waist swivels, but locks in at set intervals, but will go all the way around. Arms have a load of shoulder joints, which are going to be great for posing, and there is a bit of a bicep swivel. Elbows can get impeded by the shoulder chunks, and there's no wrist rotation at all. They can tilt a little, but because there's no rotation, when you attach the gun, it's always at a bit of a jaunty angle, which does make some shooting poses look a tad unnatural. Lastly, the head can move side to side and back and forth, but there's no tilt going on. The head sculpt is suitably movie-like, which means it looks like a whole bunch of razor blades meant to resemble a face. His visor can be hidden away inside his head, much like the Studio Series Hot Rod figure I reviewed last time, but his eyes are so beady they're practically indistinguishable. As a result, I leave the visor down. I kind of associate that visor with Jazz from the cartoons anyway. Speaking of character associations, I know a lot of the movie designs feel really alien to who the characters are meant to be. There's something about each of the first movie's designs that feel a little bit off to me, like Ratchet being green, Optimus having flames, and Bumblebee being a muscle car. Jazz always felt right though. To me, Jazz was more defined by his attitude and style in the G1 cartoon, which is why I wasn't really that bothered about him losing some of the race car aesthetic. To me, he just has to turn into something as slick as he is. Now, in terms of what Jazz is memorable for in the film, there's really only two things. There's that bit where he kicks it here for a while, you know the part, and when this happens.
You want a piece of me? You want a piece? No! I want two!
And guess what? The toy can do that too. Yep, you're pressing a button on his back and rip him in two, just like that time it happened out of nowhere in the film. And then Optimus sort of walked around carrying Jazz's corpse for a bit. To make things better, or worse, Jazz comes with a spinal column you can plug in, just to complete the look. That's morbid. Fun fact though, this isn't the only figure I have with a dead mode. I have this Tricerodon figure who can transform into a dead Triceratops mode, complete with exposed ribcage and an eye roll. If anyone knows of any figures with a dead mode, I mean ones where they transform into a dead mode rather than already being dead like that Optimus Prime that came out recently, let me know in the comments. I kinda want more. And also Jazz comes with a tiny Shia LaBeouf carrying the Allspark Cube, probably to reenact that moment when Shia ran away from the franchise the first chance he got. Smart lad. So, what do I think of Masterpiece Jazz overall? Well, I kinda love him, I can't lie. I know I said getting figures like this is what made me lose interest in collecting the fun ones, but I think I have room for all types of Transformers these days. I mean in terms of what I like, not in terms of physical room, because I do not have much left. I need shelves. Speaking of taking up room, I had heard that Masterpiece figures are a bit smaller these days, but man, I was not expecting Jazz to be a heck of a lot smaller than Masterpiece Optimus Prime. I'm not bothered, the quality of the engineering and design on this thing has more than justified its price. Granted, I got it half price, but still, that's definitely a step up from your average Generations figure. I guess all that means Jazz is a bit of a hit with me. He's got some issues here and there, but he's an overall quality figure. Pretty glad I went with this one over Ironhide now, because the more I see people talking about that one, the more of a disaster it seems. Jazz is anything but a disaster, fiddly and awkward in places, sure, but man, he looks so good and that car mode is superb. I don't do scores, but he's definitely a passing grade. So that's all from me. Thank you for watching, and if I did okay, maybe do a like and subscribe. And with all that said, I've got a split. Too soon?